Top focus on the show is once again Donald Trump. Former U.S. President Donald Trump pleaded not guilty to charges that he conspired to overturn the results of the 2020 election when he appeared in a Washington court that's located just blocks away from where a rampaging mob comprising his supporters stormed Capitol Hill in an effort to keep him in power. Trump, the leading Republican contender in the 2024 presidential race, entered the not guilty plea following in the footsteps of hundreds of others charged with crimes as an outcome of the 6th January 2021 riots at the Capitol. Trump, the 45th president of the United States, is the 1078th accused in the case. Sticking to his guns, Trump called his indictment a very sad day for America. Now, in a corner of the courtroom stood a handful of Secret Service agents, a silent reminder that this defendant was unlike any of the others who came before. Bail conditions were set. The judge warned Donald Trump not to contact any witnesses or violate any federal or state law pending trial, and scheduled his next appearance for the 28th of August. Now, Trump has been charged with conspiring to block the Congress from carrying out its work on 6th January, confirming Joe Biden's election and successfully obstructing the vote confirmation by directing his supporters to the Capitol. He's also accused of scheming to disrupt the election process and depriving Americans of their right to have their votes counted. As soon as the hearing was over, Trump's motorcade headed back to the Reagan National Airport, where he referred to the case as a persecution of a political opponent aiming to deter his 2020 campaign. He said, and I quote, "This is the persecution of the person who is leading by very, very substantial numbers in the Republican primary and leading Biden by a lot. So if you can't beat him, you persecute him or you prosecute him. We can't let this happen in America," he said. Trump's lawyers are widely expected to try and delay the proceedings as the former president's 2024 campaign gets underway. This was the third time this year that Donald Trump traveled to face a criminal arraignment, with each trip drawing live coverage of virtually every step of his journey. He also faces 3 upcoming trials in New York. A civil trial in October over allegedly fraudulent practices in his real estate business. A second civil trial in January in which he is accused of defaming a woman who accused him of rape, and a criminal trial in March in which he is accused of falsifying records to cover up payments to an adult film actor. Charges are also expected to be filed in the state of Georgia, where a grand jury is investigating efforts to subvert the 2020 election results in that state. Let's look at this particular indictment of Trump in some detail. Former U.S. President and 2024 presidential hopeful Donald Trump's indictment for efforts to overturn the 2020 election has thrown America into uncharted waters. The irony is that Trump may not be allowed to vote next year, but the indictment does not in any way bar him from contesting the 2024 presidential election and seek another term to the White House. What happens though if Trump becomes president and later gets convicted? Many fear it could trigger a constitutional crisis, as the U.S. Constitution and law currently have no clear answers to that question, simply because there is no precedent for this very complicated situation. For the first time ever, the United States is set to put on trial a former president for trying to destroy the country's democratic system and plotting to overturn a presidential election. Now, the 4 counts include conspiracy to defraud the United States of America by employing dishonesty, fraud and deceit. Trump has been accused of spreading lies about election fraud. The charges follow an investigation into the Capitol Hill riots on 6 January 2021 when the very seat of American democracy was attacked and placed under siege by a rampaging mob comprising Trump supporters. The indictment says Trump was determined to remain in power despite having lost an election. He tried to remain in office and prevent the peaceful transfer of power. Prosecutors said that for 2 months after his election loss, Trump spread lies to create an intense national atmosphere of mistrust and anger and erode public faith in the administration of the election. In public hearings, investigators aired dramatic and damning footage making the case that Trump was directly responsible for summoning what clearly became a violent mob. despite understanding that he had actually lost the election. The latest charges mean Trump has been impeached twice, arrested twice, and indicted 3 times over attempted election subversion, hush money payments to a porn actor, and the alleged mishandling of classified documents. Meanwhile, the man leading the inquiry, Special Counsel Jack Smith, is pledging to seek a speedy trial, but Trump is looking at a packed calendar for 2024 with multiple trials set to get underway. As we said, Trump's indictments will not bar him from seeking re-election as the President of the United States. While some argue it would be highly unusual for a thrice indicted candidate to win the Republican presidential nomination, consider this: Trump is the favorite to be the Republican candidate in the 2024 elections. Polls show he's closely matched with President Joe Biden in a hypothetical rematch. The Republicans have portrayed Trump's indictment as partisan and a witch hunt, clearly reflecting the former president's strong grip on the party. And remember, his support base usually reacts to his indictments by redoubling their support and boosting his fundraising. And given the amount of time it could take, some have pointed out that there is a possibility that Trump could have already been elected president by the time the trial in this case starts. The long-awaited charges are the first related to actions taken by an American president in office and set up a collision course between the justice system and a potentially volatile election slated to be held in November next year. Many Republicans, elected officials and voters have unabashedly backed Trump, seeking to portray the charges against him as a politically motivated prosecution and a Democratic plot to derail his re-election bid. The indictment marks a historic moment for a nation less than 250 years old. The first time a former president has faced criminal charges for trying to overturn the bedrock of democracy, a free and fair election. Despite the charges, Trump, as we said, leads Republican polling by more than 30 points. Nothing prevents criminal defendants from campaigning or taking office, even if they are convicted. Trump took to his social media platform, Truth Social, to thank his followers following his latest indictment and said he had never had so much support on anything before. In his all-caps post, Trump reiterated claims of corruption in the U.S. over the past 3 years. He said, "America is a nation in decline, but we will make it great again, greater than ever before. I love you all."
Well, thank you very much. This is a very sad day for America, and it was also very sad driving through Washington, D.C. and seeing the filth and the decay and all of the broken buildings and walls and the graffiti. This is not the place that I left. It's a very sad thing to see it. When you look at what's happening, this is a persecution of a political opponent. This was never supposed to happen in America. This is the persecution of the person that's leading by very, very substantial numbers in the Republican primary and leading Biden by a lot. So if you can't beat him, you persecute him or you prosecute him. We can't let this happen in America.
January 6th was a tragic day. And I've spoken and written about it extensively. I have nothing to hide. By God's grace, I believe we did our duty that day. Fulfilled the oath that I'd taken to the Constitution and to the American people. And the Constitution is quite clear about the role of the Vice President in the counting of electoral votes. It essentially says the Vice President presides over a joint session of Congress where the electoral votes that are certified by the states shall be opened and shall be counted. And irrespective of the indictment, I want the American people to know that I had no right to overturn the election. And then on that day, President Trump asked me to put him over the Constitution. But I chose the Constitution, and I always will. And I really do believe that anyone who puts themselves over the Constitution should never be President of the United States. And anyone who asks someone else to put themselves over the Constitution should never be President of the United States again.
I have read all 45 pages of the DOJ's indictment, and I can tell you that the truth is simple. Trump deliberately lied about voter fraud. Accountability for Trump and his co-conspirators is crucial if we want to stop the next Trump or Trump from undermining the will of voters again.
So the reason we're out here today is not because a former president was indicted for the third time, though that is remarkable. We're out here talking about this indictment because this is the big one. This is the one that addresses Donald Trump's efforts to prevent the peaceful transfer of power. It is crucial that litigators like us and state officials successfully enforce Donald Trump's disqualification from office under the 14th Amendment to the Constitution for engaging in insurrection. And I believe we will.
Yeah, Trump is a victim. This is a weaponized judicial system that has been using him as a target.
We literally see the Biden administration using the courts to go after a political opponent and a former president. That is stuff you see in Venezuela. That is stuff you see in dictatorships. We see it in the United States of America.
All right, time for us to take a quick break here on Global Lens, but there's lots more on the other side, including the latest controversy that's been triggered by the French President Emmanuel Macron.
इंजीनियरिंग कर रहे हैं क्योंकि सभी लोग कर रहे हैं